Okay, so good morning on the 4th of October 2021. Really busy sports weekend. Watford have sacked their manager. I think that's their 14th manager in 10 years. Interesting developments there. Barcelona have lost again, and there was rumours circulating in the mainstream media, let alone social media, that Ronald Koeman would be sacked by this weekend. They lost 2-0 to Atletico. Penrith Panthers obviously won the NRL Grand Final against South Sydney by 2 points. Brilliant game, absolutely brilliant game. There were some interesting refereeing decisions, and I will be doing an NRL season review where I just look at certain points, not where the team's finished, not at all. I can discuss, um, each individual team for next season over the winter like I did last year. But there were some interesting calls in that NRL Grand Final. And I will say this refereeing consistency, that's something the NRL has to get right because if it's a penalty in round one, on the first game of round one, it should also be a penalty in the Grand Final. I think consistency is where fans are getting frustrated. Obviously, the NHL pre season has now begun. And the regular season is just over a week away. That's really, really interesting. So I'd be interested to see who makes final rosters. There are still teams over the salary cap. The Jack Eichel situation is still ongoing, and we don't know what's going to happen with the Buffalo Sabres there and whether he's going to be traded, get traded, whether he's going to play any part this season. There's clearly that relationship's broken down. We can cite examples from history where the relationship between the player and the team is broken down irreparably. I believe that is the case. Um, and Robin Leonard, an ex-Buffalo player, has also been heavily critical of the organisation. But he's a very divisive character in himself. But he had some health problems there, some injury concerns, and he's been critical about how, when he was there, his health and injuries were dealt with, be it mental and physical health, and the player welfare side of things, with the training staff, with the coaches, with the organisation. So this is not an isolated problem, I think, with Buffalo. But the fact the team aren't doing very well and haven't done very well for a very long time is a separate point. But it is interesting. As I say, there's still teams over the salary cap, so it will be interesting to see what other roster moves take place. And there could still be a fair bit of player movement before the season starts and early on in the season as well, before we get to the trade deadline. I think the first half of the season could see a lot of players move, and not for hockey reasons, but for cap reasons. So that'll be very, very interesting what happens there. Obviously, the Olympics debate and vaccinations of athletes and quarantines, and that's still a very interesting point. Vaccination of playing staff and non-playing staff in a variety of leagues around the world. Um, the NRL and the AFL, I don't think it's compulsory at this point. Other leagues and organisations are trying to make it compulsory at this point, so it is very, very interesting what happens with player and non-playing staff vaccination with sports teams. We'll have to see what happens there. Um, you know, we're nearing the end of the sporting year, as I would put it. Um, Winding down the year now. We're into October. Not long until Christmas. Actually, it's not that far away. Christmas. We're going into another international break in European football. That's, I think, the third international break this season. So that's going to be interesting because there are concerns about players playing in South America with the travel restrictions in place, especially for Brazil and Argentina. And Premier League clubs have raised concerns about these players have got to quarantine. Obviously, there was the debacle between Brazil and Argentina last month, where the game was abandoned. There was issues with players not following quarantine procedures, um, and Premier League clubs are reluctant to release players to red list countries. I don't really watch live football. I don't have Sky or in this. Well, I don't have Sky or BT, which is in this country. Our football soccer rights are on subscription pay per view with Sky Sports and BT Sport and a few other broadcasters, including Amazon, and I just don't have them. So I've seen the report. I've seen it's like a two-all. There was an unsavoury incident involving a fan and some of the Man City coaching staff that's being investigated. Um, Again, as we're going into an international break, the only football I really watch is the internationals at this point. I've got to a point now with club football, apart from the FA Cup, where I'm becoming more and more disillusioned with the game. And it's not something I like feeling, being disillusioned with the sport, but I feel that football, F1, and a few other sports, I've become very disillusioned with them. Um, and there's a whole reason. There's loads of reasons why I've become very disillusioned with football, as I would call it. I know it was a two-all draw. It's Chelsea at top of the table going into this international break. It will be interesting to see how this international break plays out. And yeah, there are some concerns about some players being released by their clubs for teams, especially in South America. So that's something that I think is going to be an ongoing concern. I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. FIFA and UEFA are at loggerheads, and the clubs are all at loggerheads over that. Now, obviously, players want to play for their country. It doesn't matter what sport you're talking about. It doesn't. It does not matter what the sport is. Players want to play for their country. Um, and yeah, releasing players for international duty. The club country debate has got a new twist to it with the pandemic and travel restrictions and quarantines. The international break is not 2 weeks. It's like 10 days. So if you've got a quarantine for 2 weeks, these players would have already had to been released. And that's the better part of a month. They're out of commission basically. So each country's got its own travel rules on arrivals and departures to various parts of the world at the moment. Um, and as things currently stand, the situation with South America and some countries in South America is difficult. But we're going into an international break. We'll see what happens. We'll see what players do end up getting released to play. We'll see what happens and what plays out, and whether we have a repeat of Brazil Argentina last month, that is highly likely. We could have a continuation of that mess, and I do think that just select players from both Argentina and Brazil. Then would I reschedule it? I think if you're going to have qualification tournaments for World Cups and Euros, do it in the year that there is no tournament. So just have a summer tournament. That way, the club game domestically doesn't get um, disjointed with these constant breaks in play. I understand they're trying to get all these fixtures done by the club and country before the World Cup next year in the winter in the Northern Hemisphere in Qatar, and that's created a bit of fixture congestion. Obviously, the pandemic has created some fixture congestion as well, and that is something that is obviously being discussed. The current international format, I would get rid of all friendlies altogether, personally. The Nations League in Europe, I'm 50-50 on it, whether it's good or bad. I mean, it has improved a lot of the lower ranked teams have got more exposure, more meaningful games. They're developing, but it does add like an extra batch of fixtures that really congest the calendar when we're talking about player welfare. We're talking about heading in football, injuries in football. A lot of players suffering from fatigue, mental health, blah 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 blah, playing through injury. And if I was to do it, I would have the tournament qualification period in the off season, in the seasons where in the years where there isn't a Euros or a Gold Cup or a Copa Libertadores or Africa Cup. Have the summer months, the off season months as right. We'll do the qualifications now. That's where you have your international games, and then I suppose it would be good practice for tournament football the following year. I'm not in favour of the FIFA proposal put forward by Arsene Wenger for a 2-year World Cup cycle. Just use the summer months where there's normally tournament football in every 2 years. In those gaps, that's where you have the qualification for the following tournament. I think it works far better. It means the regular domestic season has less disruption. It means you can have a winter break in all European leagues. So yeah, your players can be rested for a 2-week or 3-week period between December and February, because you don't have to refixture these international breaks where club games can't take place. That's how I would do it. but obviously money has a big part to play, and there is a business model. They've obviously signed commercial contracts with sponsors. They you know uh, tournament organisers and those facilities that are used for internationals have obviously again signed commercial contracts. So there's a lot of commercial and legal contracts that have been signed that have to be honoured, and that is understandable. But the last 2 years or the last year and a half, the amount of disruption that we have seen, yes, I think this does put on the agenda, and this is the same with rugby union as well, and rugby league, and a whole host of other international sports. Is when do you fixture internationals? Um, I think ice hockey has got it right, where the world championships every year, and then the levels of world championships, so Division One, Division Two, A, B, and all that, the top tier, where obviously Canada, US, Great Britain, Russia, and all that play. They do it in May, so that's the end of the European season, towards the end of the NHL season. So as many players as possible are available to play for their countries, which is um, I think that is a way of doing it. Just schedule your international competition or competitions at the end of the season, um, or at the beginning as well. There's obviously Olympic qualification and World Championship qualification tournaments as well, where you know youth level and all sorts they come together. It's mostly between April, May, and October in ice hockey. They do it very, very well. Um, Rugby union, we do have. Hang on a second. Hello.
Hello, is that Jonathan?
It is.
Hello, Jonathan. It's Callum calling from Simple Recruitment.
Oh, hello.
How you doing? All right.
I'm fine, thank you.
Good, good, good. Just wanted to check you were still all right for the induction this morning at 9 o'clock.
There's induction today at 9.
Yes.
Right. It's going to take me. I didn't realise there was inductions today at 9. It's going to take me a little bit more than 45 minutes to get there.
Okay. How long do you think it'll take you?
Well, from where I live in Finch Hampstead to that side of Woking was at least an hour, hour and a half.
Right. Okay. Let me see if we can push it back a little bit. Let's see if we can get you in about 9:30. Is that all right?
That's fine. Yeah.
Leave that with me. What I'll do is I'll send you over all the details.
Yeah.
And then we'll get you sent over this morning and ready to go. All right.
All right. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks, Jonathan.
All right. Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Well, I'm going to have to cut this very, very short because I start my new job a bit earlier than I anticipated. Yeah, I've got a job to go to. I've got to go to work. I start my new job a little bit earlier than I thought, so I've got to get going. Didn't expect that. I've not even had fucking breakfast yet or a shower, so I'm going to have to go spelling a BO, I'm afraid. Was not expecting that. Yeah, no, I basically left my job Friday and I've sent all the paperwork over and they want me to start ASAP. So was not expecting that. Right. Toodle pip. Oh, shit.